Hello, SpongeX here with another episode of Video Games Worth Taking Your Time with my final installment of Banjo Kazooie, and here we are at the infamous Rusty Bucket Bay level. Now personally, I don't hate this level, I actually enjoy every level in this game, but this is definitely my least favorite. Like, there are parts of it I like, but there's definitely some frustrating parts in this game. I mean, aside from the giant boat, which is cool and all, I feel like the rest of this level is just kind of boring. Very narrow platforms on the edge, and not to mention how, like, when revisiting this level, you almost have to, like, go through every challenge again just to get around the level again. So you have to pay the tolls of, like, depositing all these eggs into creating little narrow bridges you have to cross, and it's just kind of annoying, but I do like all the hidden rooms you can find in this level, though. That's kind of cool, but of course, there's one room that nobody likes, and that is the infamous engine room, one of the hardest parts of this game. Oh my god. I do like the view of the horizon, though. I like how the ocean has kind of like a golden color to it, as if like there's some kind of sunset going on. And speaking of which, even the sun that you can see is kind of cool looking too. I could definitely imagine if they ever remade this game, I could definitely see this level having more of like a sunset light setting that reflects off the rest of the environment. For some reason, this is always one of my favorite areas in this level, the captain's quarters. And here we have the kitchen. I find it funny how even after beating the game and defeating Gruntilda, she's still able to sense like when you're stepping on like a hot stove or something. That's kind of funny. I also like the attention to detail here. Like, if you actually step inside of the pot of chili or whatever that is, it'll actually hurt Banjo as if he were standing on the stove. So that's pretty clever. And here we have the navigation room. I always thought this room looked really cool, especially with that radar over in the corner. There's something about like its green glow that just has a more detailed style compared to the rest of this game. There's just something about that that almost looks like semi-realistic compared to everything else in this game. Makes a really cool sci-fi kind of effect. And here's the Bunk Room, and this is where you can find an Easter egg of Conkers Bad Fur Day, which is strange because in the N64 version, it was actually an Easter egg of the beta version of Conker, 12 Tales Conker 64. They had a picture of Barry's original design back when the game was still supposed to be E-rated. But for some reason, for the Xbox port, they decided to replace it with an image from Conker's Bad Fur Day. And funny enough, it's from a very inappropriate part in that game, the part where Conker witnesses the King Bee pollinating the sunflower, and he makes that confused, disturbed look on his face. It's kind of funny how they snuck that into this game. I'm not sure whatever happened, but I remember in the Diddy Kong Racing manual, like during Conker's description, it mentioned how like he's bound to someday like cross paths with Banjo or something like that, as if like they're gonna have like a crossover or something, and that never happened, unfortunately. The closest we ever got to that was the promotional video that Microsoft released when Rare was first purchased by Rare. That was like the only time we ever saw Banjo and Conker interact outside of Diddy Kong Racing. Heck, we really didn't see them interacting in Diddy Kong Racing either. They were just playable characters in that game, if anything. But I think it's a little too late now, because that was said back when Conker was still an innocent child, and he's now like way too mature to ever cross paths with Banjo. But that being said, though, I would still love to see Conker in Super Smash Brothers, at least. I think that would be kind of cool. But they definitely have to tone him down, but it didn't stop them from adding Snake or Bayonetta into the game. So here we are about to head off to the final level, Click Clock Wood, one of my favorite levels in this game. It's very unique, not only for a final level, but for a level in general. So usually when you think of a final level in a video game, you think of the most challenging, most intimidating level or challenge that you've come across. And Banjo Kazooie did quite the opposite. Instead of building up to like a real menacing level, it ended up being one of the prettiest and most whimsical levels. It's just like a special forest that has these doorways that take you to seasons of change. I don't know how I ever would have found this little secret passageway if it weren't for an old friend of mine. Like when I first played this game, I would have never guess that there was like a little secret entrance hidden behind those tall blades of grass. It just takes you to a warp cauldron that warps you close to Clankers Cavern, so it helps make a shortcut for getting back to this area when revisiting the game. But yeah, Click Clock Wood, it always kind of reminded me of The Nightmare Before Christmas in a way, because in that movie there were all these different doorways that led to different holidays. In this case, there are different doorways that lead to seasons of change. My favorite one was always the spring doorway. I always thought the spring setting had the best color and music. Somehow I was able to find that without any help, though, the shock spring pad that's hidden back there. Now, if they ever remade this game, I'd definitely consider removing or replacing the 1-up lives. They really don't make much sense in this game. There's really no point to having 1-ups. Luckily, Banjo Kazooie figured that out early on and scrapped the lives from that game. Yeah, it's interesting how this is the only level in the game that actually has a little hub within the level. So when you first start this level, only spring is available, but throughout each doorway, there's a switch that opens the nearest neighbor. So in spring, you'll find summer, in summer, you'll find fall, and in fall, you'll find winter, and in winter, you'll find nothing. There's no more doors to open after winter. Yeah, I noticed something interesting here. The music here is from Glitter Gulch Mine in Banjo Kazooie. Or the music in Banjo Kazooie's Glitter Gulch Mine was taken from this. And it kind of makes sense, though. Originally, Glitter Gulch Mine was supposed to be a level purpose for Banjo Kazooie, but they didn't have enough time or room to put it into this game, so they saved it for the sequel. And so it kind of makes sense how there would be a little bit of music that might resemble something from Banjo Kazooie. I just love like the simplicity but complexity of this stage. It's just a giant tree, but there's just so much surrounding it, and it's quite a journey to get up that tree, though. If they ever made a remake of this, I'd definitely appreciate it if they made it where once getting up there, you can find like little shortcuts to make it easier to get back up there when revisiting the level. That would be convenient. It's quite a work to get up there. Gotta do a lot of precise platforming. And here is where we'll find the final transformation in the game, which is the Bumblebee. Now, the Bumblebee is an interesting one because it gives you infinite flight, something that not even Kazooie can do. However, it leaves you vulnerable, you can't really attack anything, and for some reason, I think the model is really strange. Look at the top of Banjo's head, you can see like a brown patch. It's like you think that's supposed to be yellow, but instead they made it the color of his stripes. So I don't know why they did that, but maybe it was restrictions or they didn't notice when making this game. But so if they ever made a remake, I'd definitely consider redesigning it to look better. But so this also is one of the only returning transformations in Banjo Kazooie. they expanded it. Not only is it once again part of the final level in that game, but Banjo can do it more than just have infinite flight when in bee form in Banjo Tooie. He can also shoot stingers out of his face, oddly enough. I've never heard of that ever happening, a bee shooting stingers out of his face. That's just weird, but it's cool that he can finally attack. He can even switch into a first-person perspective, and so you can shoot down things while flying. It's pretty cool. If you press the X button, well, hold the X button while flying, Banjo will slightly speed up a bit. It's not very noticeable, but... So I found it funny how back there's a Venus flytrap, and if you noticed, it wasn't attacking me. But if you go near it while in Banjo's bear form, the trap will actually try snapping at him. And so it makes you wonder, like, what? And then you go like, oh, I get it. It's actually a bear trap. It's a bear trap that looks like a fly trap. That's actually kind of funny. This is one strange looking beehive. It looks more like a giant decapitated bee.
Greetings, comrades. I am a fellow bee just like you, and not a bear in disguise.
I'm bored with you. I like the little touches here. It's like, at first you're wondering what the heck is this, but then as the seasons progress, you see more added to this little area. It makes you realize, oh, someone was building a cabin here, and it took them up until fall to actually get it completed. That's kind of interesting. That's what I love about this level, the progression that goes on during the seasons of change. Speaking of which, this is Nabnut the squirrel's house, and you'll see him going through like a squirrel's lifespan basically during this. So it's like here he just woke up from winter, so the first thing he's gonna do is eat a lot of acorns. In summer he'll have a stomachache because he ate too much. In fall he'll be sad that he needs to get more acorns, he doesn't know where to find them, and then you have to help him find them. And then winter he's just hibernating, and the cycle repeats. I find it interesting that you can fly up here. I mean, there's nothing to do up in these branches, but it's still kind of cool that you can actually reach this as the bee form. It's interesting how gloomy and gray the sky looks, like in the hub area. For some reason, when I played this at a younger age, I never bothered looking up here, so it's really cool to actually see some of that attention to detail they added. And it's also cool how, even at the entrances, you can see seasons of changes affecting, whether it's the falling snowflakes, the falling leaves. Now, before I head off to the next seasons, I just want to goof off around at the entrance of this level. Whoop. So of course, just like with every other transformation, if you try leaving this area, the magic will wear off. But one thing I never bothered trying to do is, wait a minute, what happens if you try going to the warp cauldron then? And unfortunately, same thing. So there's no point in going any further. So I've only tried going out the other ways, the entrance to getting here and the entryway to the final battle itself, and both of those cause the magic to wear off. And speaking of which, the bee form only works in spring in Click Clock Wood. So if you try going into summer, winter, or fall, it will not work. The magic wears off. And there's some pretty funny excuses for why Mumbo won't change it into a bee like in those other seasons. In summer, it's too hot out, so he doesn't want to do anything. In fall, he's busy sweeping the leaves, and then in winter, he's on vacation. And I just thought that was really funny. So, it kind of helps, like, increase the difficulty of these levels a bit. In spring, it was easy to kind of cheese through that level, because you could just fly anywhere in the bee form, but in the others, it's like, oh, you're gonna have to find other ways to scale up this tree. Now, summer was always my least favorite alteration of this level. I just think it looks uglier with all the dry-looking colors, and then they added too many wild bees everywhere, which doesn't give you much freedom to explore without wasting up many gold feathers. And then the water's all droughted out, making it harder to get to the other end. It was easier to swim across, and now you gotta climb up the sides and walk around the tree to get there. Now, I personally don't hate the summertime version of this, I just think it's the least appealing. I feel like this part of the game is broken. There's no way of getting across without getting hurt. No matter what you do, Banjo can never make that jump. So yeah, if they ever made a remake of this, they definitely need to try to fix that up a bit. You lazy Shaman. I like how he actually, for once, has his torches turned off. Every other version of his hut, he always has the torches lit. But funny, though, if you look closely, you can still see the glow from where the torches are supposed to be up on the ceiling. Funny how they forgot to patch that up. I honestly never noticed this when playing it on N64 because the resolution's a lot lower, but I never realized that patch on top of the beehive was transparent slightly. I always thought that was like a solid color on the N64, but if you look closely on this, you notice that it's slightly transparent and has like a honeycomb little pattern on it. Now this kind of confused me because compared to other platformers, Banjo Kazooie usually did a good job at making the platforms look more believable, like they could actually exist. But in this, it's like this level they just said, "Ah, screw it." They decided to have floating boardwalks in the sky with nothing connecting them. It's so strange, but I just find it funny how like practically every level had like consistent platforms. It didn't have magical floating platforms like you see in Mario, but for this level they just said, "Ah, screw it." And Nabnuts ate too much. I did not need to see or hear that. Now let's head off to fall. I didn't mean that kind of fall. Two in one shot. Awesome. Now fall, this is probably my second favorite version of Click Clock Wood. I like the color and music here. The sky looks very different in this version too. It just looks very reddish, like a sunset. I just like all the slopes that are added to this because of all the leaf piles. The water's back too. Now, there's something about Click Clock Wood where, I mean, it makes sense considering who this game was made by, but a lot of Click Clock Wood reminds me of Donkey Kong Country. Like the art style and colors and textures those games were known for in a lot of their jungle levels or forest levels. Speaking of which, there's like a theory that the original version of this level was supposed to be called Fungus Forest, and like not much is known about it, but it's believed that it was a scrapped level and it was somehow repurposed for Donkey Kong 64 with a name change. In Donkey Kong 64 it was called Fungi Forest. And yeah, that was always one of my favorite levels in Donkey Kong 64, and it's even more interesting when you know that it somehow has ties with Banjo Kazooie. Heck, it's believed that that was originally supposed to be part of Clankers Cavern as well, because in an old beta footage, it showed a beta version of Clanker back when he was supposed to be an original whale, not a mechanical whale. And he was in an area where the music sounded very similar to Fungi Forest from Donkey Kong 64. And so that leads the connection to it even further. Heck, one of the screenshots in the original N64 version of this game, back in Banjo's house, there's a screenshot. Well, there's like a little still frame hanging on the wall, and if you look closely, it showed like some kind of forest level, but it wasn't Click Clock Wood, oddly enough, and many fans believe that was originally Fungus Forest, and it's especially proven even further when you realize how they replaced it with an image of Click Clock Wood in this Xbox version. So it kind of carries that even further. It's similar to like what they did with the berry picture in Rusty Bucket Bay. They removed any trace of a beta version, and so it makes me believe that that kind of proves that theory even further, that Fungus Forest was indeed the original version of Click Clock Wood. And I mean, it's also interesting to know that it's possible that that was also supposed to be Clankers Cavern. It would explain why Clankers Cavern feels like such a strange level. I mean, you know, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I mentioned how Clankers Cavern was a strange level, and that it seems like one of the smallest levels in the game, and it just tries making everything feel kind of maze-like in certain areas. There's just so many, like, paths that lead to nowhere, and it's just such a random level in the game, and it kind of explains, because originally Clanker was supposed to be a part of Fungus Forest. He was just like a whale that you found swimming in a little underwater area, and so yeah, it's crazy how they took that one little gimmick from a level and somehow tried turning it into an entire level. It just felt really strange. And sometimes that happens in games. Sometimes developers have what started off as a small idea for a level, but then a lot of things change, like removing the level entirely, but they don't want to scrap a certain element, so they find a new way to introduce it into the game. I mean, just look at Conkers Bad Fur Day. They took a whole game that was meant to be E-rated, and they had to remove so many things, but they tried wondering how many things they could keep. And in order to keep it, they'd wonder, like, what would they have to do in order to spice it up? It's now an M-rated game, so how are they going to take this kid-friendly premise and turn it into a mature-rated setting? And winter is coming. Now, winter is probably my third favorite version of this level. I don't think it's bad, but I just think it's it feels dead, which makes sense, because all the plant life is now dead. It's winter, but I just feel like this one felt surprisingly easy compared to the other version. The only thing that's really hard about it is they added Sir Slushy from Freeze Easy Pete throwing snowballs around, and the water now is frozen and icy cold, so it can hurt you if you swim under it. But other than that, though, I feel like this mostly, like, this doesn't feel as unique as like the other versions of Click Clock Wood, because we've already had a snow level in this game. This basically feels like an emptier snow level, but it's still really cool, though, especially when you've already seen the other version of Click Clock Wood. So it's real interesting to see how different it looks in winter. The music is really nice as well. I thought it was really funny how for once Mumbo isn't in his hut. Instead, it's a really rude beehive. Or, beekeeper. Whatever. you see that beautiful flower dead. Surprisingly, you can still enter the Beaver's Dam during this part. I forgot to show that during the other parts, but in spring there's like a beaver and his dam is blocked off by a rock. And then in summer, when the water's all dried up, you can destroy the rock, but you can't enter his dam because there's no way to swim up it. And so in fall, you're finally able to go through that. And if you go there in fall, you'll get a Jiggy, but if you come back in winter, you'll get an extra honeycomb piece, which helps expand your health when you collect enough. So, funny thing, this beaver's name is Naughty, which is possibly a reference to Donkey Kong Country, because the beaver enemies in those were called Naughties, and so it's kind of funny how you're just talking to a beaver named Naughty. Pretty clever reference to Donkey Kong Country. I'm surprised Microsoft was able to get away with that, because, this game had some references to other Nintendo franchises and characters, and so for the Microsoft version, they were forced to remove any mention of those names. But it looks like for that, they were still able to keep that, despite how Naughty is a Donkey Kong Country character. Yeah, like, this divide between Nintendo and Rare really confuses me sometimes. So, because Microsoft bought out Rare, you know, it made it where every Rare character who wasn't part of, like, the Donkey Kong franchise is, a creation of Rare, basically. So, like, characters like Diddy Kong, although Rare created them, they're no longer Rare characters because they are part of the Donkey Kong franchise, which Nintendo owns. And same could be said about Crystal from Star Fox. I mean, she was created by Rare, but she is part of the Star Fox franchise, so she is a Nintendo character. But then when it comes to Conker, Banjo, Cameo, like, those are Rare characters, so they belong to Microsoft. But then it makes it confusing when there are characters who crossed over into other... So, like, I think one of the most confusing cases here is Tip Tup the Turtle. From Diddy Kong Racing. He makes cameo appearances in Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie. And what really confuses me is how eventually Rare and Nintendo teamed up again to make a Diddy Kong Racing port for the Nintendo DS, and Banjo and Conker were excluded from the game with the excuse that they are now Microsoft characters and are not allowed to be in the game. But Tip Tup was playable in that game. And technically, that would make him a Banjo Kazooie character if he was able to appear in the Banjo game. So it makes me wonder, like, how come Tip Tup was able to be in that game but not Banjo or Conker? It's just really weird. Aw, that's cute. Nabnut actually has a wife and they're sleeping. So, off to the entrance to the final battle. Unfortunately, I cannot revisit the final battle, because once you beat it, there's no going back unless you start a new save file. But it's still fun to go back to look at, like, the scenery on the way there. Yeah, if they ever did a remake, I would definitely want them to somehow add some kind of way to replay some of these areas. Like, before you get to the final battle, there's a really random quiz show you have to go through, and some people really hated this part. I loved it, though. I just loved how challenging and, fun it was. I mean, especially because I was one of the players who actually bothered, you know, paying attention to my surroundings when playing this game as a kid. So, a lot of the questions were really fun to answer. But yeah, this definitely is, it takes more than skill. It does take luck to get through this part, and it can be really frustrating if you die during this part. For every wrong answer, you lose a health point, and then there are even certain questions that have a real pesky peril to it, where if you get the answer wrong, it'll automatically flip you off the board into your fiery doom. And so, yeah, I definitely love to somehow be able to replay this part, but unfortunately you cannot after beating it. And so, yeah, if they ever make a remake, please make a way to replay this part. Banjo Tooie did that. Banjo Tooie brought back the quiz show, but it wasn't a board game. It was more of like answer the buzzer kind of quiz show, and it even had a multiplayer version of it. And so I liked how in that game you actually got to play it. Heck, you even got to play it before getting to it in the game. It was part of the multiplayer mode. So let's head off to the uppermost floor of Gruntilda's lair. I just love how everything gets more eerie the closer you get to Gruntilda. The music changes and the scenery just starts looking more gothic. I just thought that was a really nice touch. I remember like my heart was just pounding when I first played this game as a kid. I just like, oh my god, I am here, I'm finally gonna take down the witch. And what's gonna happen? And it's just so suspenseful. Yeah, Rare really knew how to build up their final battles in a lot of their games. It's funny though how some of their final battles end up seeming more anticlimactic than you were expecting. I remember like Donkey Kong 64, its final battle was more silly than anything, but I like how in this game they tried making it a little more dramatic. Banjo Tooie as well. So although there's nothing in this other room, it still leaves a huge mystery on, was there something intended in this room? Because the only time we actually see this room in the game is during 2 cutscenes, and they're mostly for like, originally Gruntilda kidnapped Banjo's sister, and she's gonna use a machine to swap her ugliness with Tootie's beauty, apparently, and so you had to save Tootie before that happened. But one of the biggest mysteries was this door right here. A lot of people are wondering like, what is beyond it? And unfortunately, a lot of hackers managed to like clip through it, and they found out there's nothing back there. But one thing I never realized is, so a lot of people noticed there was one door over there, and apparently a lot of people on the internet claim to have the same set of mind. But what I didn't realize is there's a second door. If you look over here, there's a second one. I don't know how so many people missed that, including myself, but yeah, there are 2 doors in this room. But somehow everyone always noticed that one on the left. But oh my god, like I always wonder, like, was Stop and Swap needed to open these doors, or what were they, darn it? I want to know. We're never gonna know. So that's one thing I'd love to see them do in a remake. Have it where after like completing the game 100%, those doors open, and it leaves you to wonder what is beyond it. Now, I think like a good theory for what could be beyond there is some kind of laboratory, and there's like machinery that you can use to transfer the Stop and Swap items over to Banjo Tooie. That would be kind of like a clever way of getting those items from one end to the other, instead of just having them magically warp over like they did in the Xbox versions. So in this room right here is pretty much the final resting area. It's where if you collected enough notes, you can get some items to help you on your final battle. Well, that's all I have to show for Banjo Kazooie. The next game I'm definitely going to consider revisiting is Banjo Tooie. So see you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.